Hello and welcome to Face to Face. My name is Godfred Akoto Boafo. My guest today is a lawyer who wants to rock the establishment and become the president of the Ghana Football Association. Amanda Clinton is our guest on Face to Face. Amanda, welcome to Face to Face.
Thanks for having me on the show, Godfred.
Last I heard of Amanda Clinton, she was leading a class action suit to retrieve money from Menzgold clients. Here we are, Amanda wants to be GFA president. When did this happen?
A few weeks ago, I decided definitely that I was going to run. A lot of people had mooted the idea of me running for the female position on the executive committee. And, you know, given the skill set that's required for the president's position, I thought I'd be able to help women more as president, as well as execute other agendas on behalf of the GFA.
Do you have history with the GFA? It's a prerequisite.
Yes, it is a prerequisite. I mean, a lot of people don't know this about me, but I actually used to work for the Attorney General's Department in Ghana a few years ago for 3.5 years. I was in the newly re-established international team. So we dealt with everything coming in from different departments, including Ministry of Sport, so anything like from CAF requests, FIFA requests, etc., you know, that would go through our desk. So I became familiar, you know, that was like my first foray into it. Second division teams, I've done some work for them in terms of organizational management. And last June, after the ANAS expose, the former executive committee of the GFA were injuncted from holding themselves out as members of the GFA. So in order to stop the liquidation process, you know, I petitioned FIFA, spoke to government, you know, dealt with the public interest matter, speaking on their behalf in order to stop the winding down of this company. So all the clubs are, you know, still part of the GFA, in part due to my effort, but also due to another law firm's effort as well.
Okay. So basically that is where the history is. But I guess I must ask this. Do you even like football?
Oh, I love football. You know, I'm a massive Hearts of Oaks fan, as you can probably imagine. And I like Chelsea as well, but I do like football, yeah.
Okay. What exactly is the skill sets that you bring? You talk about, well, people thought I should go for the EXCO, but I looked at what is required and I felt, hey, let me go for president. Yeah. What is the skill set?
I truly believe a president of a high-profile organization such as the GFA requires someone who can be a new face, a new brand, requires someone who can see the whole picture in terms of how everything sits together, including the committees and, you know, campaign, you know, raising money for the organization. I think a strong need is there for corporate sponsorship, particularly within corporate Ghana, transparency, accountability, and the ability to deal with stakeholders whilst remaining neutral. And I think only a new face and someone who is capable of revitalizing the brand will work in this case.
And you think that you are qualified to execute these things that you've spoken about?
Well, I mean, you're the owner of a football team, a very, you know, good football team from what I hear. And one of the main criteria I think the delegates are looking for is someone that will revamp football in terms of have the ability to drive the campaign that the GFA has been transformed. And given my history with high-profile cases in particular, my ability to deal with stakeholders, my ability to campaign, you know, and fundraise, etc. I do think I'm the right fit, particularly because I'm not labouring under the view that I know absolutely everything there is to know about football on the pitch. But this is an administrative job, and it just happens to be football. So you need a very particular administrative skill set, which I think I bring to the role.
You talk about people in football. Delegates matter in
very
this
much so.
Conversation.
120 delegates.
Yes, you have to deal with clubs.
Yeah.
In this instance, how is that going for you?
It's going well, but we're having a very measured pace in terms of The focus or the strategy is, a lot of media blitz. Like this morning I had 5 interviews back to back in one location at one of our offices. That was just the easiest way to deal with it. And after the media blitz, just really going out there. I mean, it's Takrady, Cape Coast, and Kumasi next week, and if not, definitely the week after. But we have a plan.
And does it look like a winning plan?
It does, because I've really felt encouraged by the fact that the more football people I speak to, the more I realize they're far more open than people in the corporate world in terms of they want to have a conversation. They have been ostracized to a certain extent from that conversation because, football has been on the standstill. Football is bleeding where it matters the most at the local club level. They want to be heard. And if they keep on meeting, people who say they want to be president, it is for them to hear the sincerity of that message and decide themselves. But, I mean, so far it's been really good in terms of the delegates I've spoken to, because to tell you the truth, they're just kind of sick of politics within football, and they just want someone in there to do the work and to have integrity, which, God willing, I think, I can bring to the table.
Let's talk about the organization a bit, the Ghana Football Association. Its image has taken a bit of a battering in the past year. How do you go about changing that?
Well, from a public relations point of view, this is a fantastic opportunity because everything that is looked at as negatively, you can also look at it as positive in terms of the light is, in terms of the focus is on GFA right now. So if I come in, my plan ultimately is within the first 100 days to introduce signature programs that will just show in such a short space of time what can be done and to set the pace for the rest of the term. I definitely plan on engaging further with corporate Ghana, who I'm used to engaging with. I plan on ensuring that I engage with FIFA as well as all other stakeholders at a very senior level, and just ensure that I change the culture of the organisation. Because, for instance, organizational management is as such whereby you can write the best plan in the world. You can even give it to everybody, and you can do, video, audio, written, etc. But it means nothing if you don't change the culture of what's going on at the GFA, and if you don't introduce what you say is your leadership style. And in my manifesto, I mentioned
metamorphosis of the Ghana Football Association,
which is it means from a caterpillar to a full-blown organism that is a butterfly.
Interesting.
But ultimately, I explore the idea of servant leadership, which multi-billion-dollar companies like UPS abroad adopt, and it's basically everything about the organization at the leadership level is to serve the body that is the fraternity, the stakeholders, etc. And what that does, it encourages not only the employees, but the stakeholders, and there's this renewed sense of it's not about me, it's about us and what we can do to move the organization forward. So that's my leadership style, servant leadership.
I can understand you're looking at this from a very corporate perspective, but football also is social entertainment.
Of course.
I haven't heard anything about how you intend on generating interest. The stadiums are empty. People have fallen out of love with the game. The fact that you bring in $100 million doesn't mean people are happy. Oh,
$100 million does a lot to any organization, particularly when it comes to sharing the beauty of football with even more people, because you're able to do so for free, or you're able to do so more with youth, or you're able to introduce like a juvenile, a league, a proper league whereby, there is a certain standard in terms of a juvenile league. You're able to pump more money into female sports. You're able to build an indoor arena for the indoor football team. These are some of the signature things I would introduce with, by getting backing, and wanted to introduce within the first 100 days just to show the pace of what can happen. But believe me, a lot of money can do a lot to an organization, particularly because the more you pour into the organization and it reaches all levels, the more people who wouldn't have an interest would have more interest in it.
You've spoken about the juvenile level. I have an interest in the juvenile level. That is where the game is at. And
I've met the president and the deputy just last week.
That's where also a lot of people in football say the biggest problem lies.
Yeah, of course.
Because attention hasn't been paid. Outside of you looking for money, which will take a while, how do you intend to restructure what is Ghana's juvenile football?
First of all, by meeting those who head it, as I already have last week, listening to their concerns, which I did, and understanding how juvenile football at associative level works, which is FIFA's belief that anybody who wants to play should play. Mm-hmm. And so if you're getting so many people coming in, with more funding, even more people can come in. But it needs to be more organized in terms of a streamlined league. Furthermore, the juveniles have only got 2 votes at Congress. I think this is the first time they've got it. It's just introduced in the statutes. Mm-hmm. So, things are slowly coming together for them. But ultimately, just like politics and everything else, if you don't invest in the young, the future is not there. And if we've got a problem in Ghana whereby the majority of very good players, the first thing they think of is, going outside, we can stem that by ensuring that we have more youth that play at a higher level, so we can spot who has talent, and then pay players more at a higher level so that we can retain them and foster a sense of nationalism towards football. But I mean, honestly, those who are the fringes will be at the heart of my plan in terms of juvenile, women, indoor sports, because that is what I can take up to a certain level very quickly, whilst also focusing on the national teams and focusing on zero tolerance of corruption.
We will get there. We will get there. But these days we talk about boots and books.
Yeah.
I haven't heard you talk about how at that level you have footballers who are interested in books as well as their boots.
Well, I mean, that can be addressed in the same way as the American Basketball League addresses it at every level, including at school, at professional level, at semi-professional level, which is if you don't keep your grades up, then no matter how good you are, you can't play. I mean, that would be too much of a harsh rule for people who might not have the same standard of education they're exposed to. But eventually, those who are selected, for instance, on scholarships, on fast track programs, etc., that I would hope to introduce, that criteria would be in place that, yes, you might be coming in from a different level, but we want to see that you're keeping your grades up consistently, because anything can happen, including a knee injury. So you need to keep that up, and this is an opportunity that you might not have got had you not been, so good at playing football.
Coaching.
Yeah.
How do we improve our coaches? What is the Amanda Clinton plan for improving coaches?
The Amanda Clinton plan is to just make sure I engage with coaches.
Have you spoken to the Coaching Association, by the way?
Yes, I have. I've also spoken to Coach Eric as well. But I definitely think engaging with the coaches is important, but also fostering this idea that, if coaches were paid more, maybe they wouldn't, you know what I mean, in terms of the game wouldn't be fixed sometimes. And getting them on board in terms of we cannot improve football in the country if matches just go a particular way, aside the fact that it's nothing to do with the game. Do you know what I mean? And I think a lot of people, having sat at home for a year and having been at the fringes of football, even though they're supposed to be at the heart of football, have really had a lot of time to rethink their ideals. And
so, again, my question remains unanswered. How do you fix the coaching problem? Because there are those who say there have been advancements in the game that have not touched our coaches, for instance. How does the Amanda Clinton run FA impact modern science, modern knowledge to our coaches?
Our coaches, Well, I think we also have to look at what Mourinho said when he came to visit Ghana and he spoke to the president. He made two important observations, being a professional himself. You should know this more than me.
But you're the one running for the FA presidency.
Well, he made two important observations in terms of he deals with coaching at an international level, and he's studying the Ghanaian model. And one of his observations was that surely, if some of the coaches that are being recruited from outside cannot, objectively speaking, get a coaching job, they're not like headhunted when they're in their own countries or throughout Europe, why would we recruit those and think they are going to transform something in terms of coaching? Secondly, he made the observation that, we really do have to get behind our coaches in this country in terms of have a wider pool of coaches that are trained within Ghana and outside, and not just sort of leave it after like a 3-week training program, but we're really developing a group of coaches that are actually going to feed into the system in terms of train others, etc. Because at the end of the day, coaching is about strategy. And anybody can improve their strategy if they're serious about it, particularly in the area of coaching. So that would be my strategy, just really develop coaching nationally and internationally in terms of more people being trained and passing it down, as well as making sure if we recruit the best, and making sure that players who are playing nationally, for instance, they need to be tempted back to Ghana, apart from the issue of nationalism. They need to have their salaries matched to a certain extent, as much as we can, that's reasonable for where we are in football.
But those decisions are decisions that have to be made by individual clubs based on wherewithal. They are not decisions that you can.
No, not at all. But I'm saying that, for instance, I'm thinking particularly at the national level.
Okay.
Because that's a lot of focus has been on the national level, particularly because we've been losing a few games. Internationally. So, in talking about coaching and players, one cannot, divorce from the conversation what's happening at the higher level in terms of the national level.
Let's talk about women in football. Have you been paying attention to the women?
Very much so. I mean, some of the people who signed for me were heads of clubs for women's teams, and I really got an opportunity to listen to them.
What have they been telling you is the problem with Ghana football when it comes to women?
Some of them, literally, I think renewal comes up next month or the month after. Some of them don't want to renew. I mean, that's how frustrated they are right now. So I was just encouraging them to just hang in there, because it's more for cost. The cost of keeping the team, and, they're feeding these girls 3 meals a day and they have no support, and the money particularly isn't filtering down, because we also have to understand a lot of money is earmarked for female football, because it's a buzzword, female football from FIFA level, etc. There's a lot of funding for it. But what they found is that when it came into the system, it just didn't trickle down.
Okay.
So I would very much, and I'm not just saying this, but believe me, if I'm elected the next president of the GFA, it would be very easy for a lawyer, and someone with legal training, for instance, that
the past president was a lawyer. We also had that ended.
I don't think he was a practicing lawyer. But in any case, I would, for instance, publish. I would publish very much. For instance, if a $2 million fund came from FIFA for just earmarked for women's sports, that would automatically be published on the website with a note, with an announcement that.
But it's always been published.
No. But an announcement that every time money is distributed to a club, it will, not only will you get a graph, but you will get a breakdown of exactly how much down to the peswa. Because when you are accountable, you really do it for yourself. Meaning, it will be so embarrassing if you have an open policy of publishing how the money is distributed every quarter, for instance, but no updates are there. And then the media and the different stakeholders who heard me, say that this would be a normal thing in terms of publishing, didn't happen. So it's really important.
So for you, making sure that the money that comes in from FIFA gets to the women is at the heart of how you want to develop the game when it comes
of course,
to women.
Because people, I've met club owners, female club owners, who literally, they know their renewal is coming up next month, and they don't want to renew because it's just they're hemorrhaging financially. But this money, another part of my model is, in terms of my administration, should I be elected, is this over-reliance on FIFA would, God willing, be a thing of the past. Because although my manifesto is based on FIFA principles in terms of if you replicate FIFA principles on a national level and localize it, then you're halfway there to solving the problem. However, the autonomy that it should be the GFA can only be fostered if we become self-reliant, if we create new financial channels such as corporate sponsorship at a higher level, because there's this renewed confidence in the brand. And that nobody can show us in terms of like, oh, the money didn't come in and so everything is at a standstill. No, I really think self-generation of money is something that will not only filter down, but even local clubs will be watching and saying, well, you know, things have changed. How can we feed into that to do that for ourselves?
All right, then. You're listening to Miss Amanda Akoto Clinton, who is telling us what she's going to do if she becomes GFA president. For that to happen, though, she has to first make it through vetting, which she has been. Announcements coming up on Friday, so I'll be keeping you updated on that. But Face to Face will be right back with more. Welcome back to Face with aspiring president of the Ghana Football Association, Miss Amanda Clinton. Someone that I'm trying to move us through the various levels of Ghana football. So we started at Juvenile. Division 1 football, obviously where we have the most clubs, the most investment in. What is the idea? There are those who have said, do we need to play a national league? Do we play a regional league? What is it? There are too many clubs in there. What are your ideas regarding making Division 1 solvent and interesting and also sustainable?
Division 1, I really think, you know, obviously people know what the problems are in terms of what's happening with Division 1, but I really believe you can't make a decision without the Division 1 teams in terms of stakeholder engagement to find out what it is that people want and what it is that they think is a problem, and then making an informed decision as to whether that's going to work. We know what the problems are, Amanda. Hooliganism.
Too many clubs. People not obeying rules.
Yeah.
What level of stakeholder engagement do you need for that?
Well, in terms of, again, the thing is about stakeholder engagement, people always think they know what the issues are. But particularly when they're in it, they just kind of like are immersed in it and they're not a bit removed. But real stakeholder engagement is to even assess how many clubs feel like this. You know, is it the majority? And if so, how can it be addressed? What are their suggestions? You know, what is the committee's suggestions in terms of the committee that deals with this? But I really do believe that it's true. I mean, there should be less clubs in Division 1. But it's just ruling that out. But that would be one of many things. I don't know if that is the worst thing that's happening in Ghana football right now, though. The worst thing that's happening is the overall issue of corruption being taken as the norm, mismanagement, lack of ownership.
Is that how you have seen it from the outside?
Yes. I don't say that from the outside. I would say that, I mean, I was so inside football to a certain extent. I was trusted with helping to spearhead a campaign that affected every club in this country. The fact that people even had a GFA to go and lodge forms at was in part due to a lot of the efforts, you know, not only myself, but Sociated Law and different actors, you know, were doing. So
when you talk about corruption, what
I
are you
wouldn't say I'm
about?
Outside football. I'm inside football.
When you talk about corruption, what are you talking about then?
Corruption on a very basic level is anything that goes against achieving the agenda that the money is set for. So if the money has been earmarked for something and it's been used in a different way, that's corruption.
Do you have specific examples of these other football associations?
Well, I have specific allegations. I mean, as I told you, I mean, I've spent the last 2 weeks in particular really trying to listen to what people are saying. And a lot of people would complain that money has been earmarked, particularly for the women's sports, etc. It never filtered down. There's no level of transparency where you can even question why the money didn't come. Because in a way, I suppose people were just so grateful that money even came, they just hope it would come directly to them. Things like that, it shouldn't be hit and miss. It should just be like, well, the money came for a purpose, this is how it should be spent. Corruption in terms of players even paying to get into football teams, referees being paid. I mean, it's so pervasive.
And how do you resolve issues like this? Referees, for instance, you mentioned referee. That is a significant issue you've mentioned. Yeah. The perception that referees are paid.
Yeah, I think resolving
How do you do that?
Resolving it involves zero tolerance for corruption. The second issue is, I think, with the new statutes, with the GFA statutes, and with some of the policy that they're rolling out. This issue has been discussed with FIFA, etc. And so it would be almost like an interdisciplinary approach in terms of, well, it's a criminal offence, it's an offence and it should be treated as such. We also know, for instance, at CAF level, there's this sanitization of football in terms of Samora, Mrs.
Fatma Samora.
Fatma Samora has just started that campaign. So the issue of corruption is everywhere in the world, particularly in football. But localizing it and dealing with it in Africa in particular, particularly Ghana, is something that can be addressed because people know point blank. Well, if you commit this offence and you're found to have committed it, you're automatically banned for at least 5 years, or you're automatically banned for life, depending how serious it is. We take corruption very seriously. This is a new approach to corruption in football. It's very transparent. And so if you still want to engage on that level, then perhaps it might not be the sport for you.
I'm spending a bit of time on this because it's at the heart of the game. FIFA says my game is fair play.
Yeah.
Fairness is at the heart of this. So clubs go in there with a spirit of, I am going to compete to win. And so when you talk about...
Competing to win is strategy.
I understand that, but I'm simply saying that is where, when you talk about corruption, people are looking to influence games in certain ways, according to what you have said. What are the specific steps then? Because unless a club comes to you to tell you that, hey, I'm trying to pay off Amanda Clinton FC, or referee comes to tell you that, hey, Amanda Clinton FC is trying to bribe me, you have basically nothing to work with.
Well, for instance, we have a lot to work with, because one thing we can trust Ghanaians for in our country is someone seeing something and reporting something.
Really?
Oh, yes. I mean, we've even
in
had
football?
it, particularly in football. And particularly if a new policy is introduced that there's zero tolerance and it's affecting the other side in terms of the other team, of course. I mean, and I think even within the ranks, I mean, we've even seen it with the integrity tests that we all had to submit ourselves to. It was rigorous. And apart from the issue of, have you ever committed a crime? Have you, do people have complaints against you? Is there anything outstanding in court? Is there any commission report that has ever been against you? Has there, you know what I mean? Things like this. And apparently, I mean, God willing, it didn't happen to me because it wasn't mentioned, but apparently people even took the time to handwrite letters, if not type letters, to the vetting committee to talk about people's character and the issue of integrity, which is things that have never been done before.
But isn't that also
and that
part
wasn't
of the
sabotage?
competition?
That was not
Why
sabotage.
not? Why can't
we
it
know
be?
It's not sabotage because I didn't
15 years of nobody filing complaints.
No, we had 15 years of nobody filing complaints because, respectfully, the last 13 years has been under one administration. When the year
but there were people from the outside. You had private citizens filing complaints against the vetting at the vetting committee.
For instance, my another aspirant running, the lawyer,
Lawyer
Ankoma running. I was on a radio station with him, and he made a very interesting observation.
Which was? That
the GFA Presidential election was coming up, and I think they had to do things like go through regional, national, something. It was something that needed to be done. And that hadn't taken place, and then the election was going to take place. So he went straight to the High Court, and he got an injunction to stop the presidential elections actually taking place based on this Huge anomaly. So do you know what happened?
What happened?
For an entire week, the GFA was closed down and they took the elections to
Tamale.
Another person, Papayo, another aspirant.
Fred Papo, you mean?
Yes, Fred Papo.
You have to learn these names if you want to be in Ghana football.
Yes,
Amanda.
I know. But the point is, I'm sort of spearheading my campaign and I'm not noticing their campaigns too much. But I do notice...
These are stakeholders, though. They are not just persons. These are stakeholders.
But I listened to his words and what he said, and I even get people to tell me what he said. He said something very important as well. He said he was one of the very few, the brave, who even attempted to say that he wanted to run for president a few years ago. And even when he went to pick up his forms, he was accosted outside GFA and lots of people came around and said, but what do you think you're doing? What do you think you're doing? We already have a president, etc., etc. And every time, I think within that week, he tried to submit the form, the actual office would be closed. So it doesn't exactly foster a sense of transparency. There was never an open process in terms of who could run. And if you dared on your 50th birthday, not that I'm anywhere near that, but on your 50th birthday, to express some hope of one day, maybe somehow in the future, becoming GFA president.
Georgia Freer, thanks you very much.
You might all of a sudden lose your position. I mean, these are just 3 aspirants that we're talking about. So this election does so much for Ghana football because not only is the spotlight on it in terms of the Ghana Football Association, but it means those who are qualified, and respectfully, I am a qualified candidate, well, we'll leave it to the
until
vetting Friday. We'll leave it to the vetting committee, so God willing, can actually come forward and say, well, this is what I do for organizational management. This is what I do for marketing. This is what I do for grassroots mobilization and stakeholder engagement. And I see the whole picture. So I should go out as the face and the brand. And before that, I wouldn't even dared, and I don't think anybody else did apart from one or two of the people that I mentioned.
Does it matter that the person who comes in has no links with the former administration?
I think you cannot paint everybody with the same brush. I think that would be completely the wrong approach to have. And that's why people weren't disqualified right from the get-go, just by merely being part of the old administration. I think one should always have the opportunity to showcase how different they are, what distinguishes them, and how they've been painted with the wrong brush. So definitely not. And I think everybody who's been part of the old administration, because this is where people get it wrong, everybody who has been part of the old administration, to a certain extent, I think should realize if you've been there for 13 years, 12 years, 10 years, etc., one should always look at it as an honor that most of them, even though people say conflict of interest, most of them were owners of a team and they had the highest honor in Ghana football in terms of associative sports in being elected to the highest level, which is the executive committee. And so what one does normally is after 4 years or 8 years is you do a very good job normally, and then you go back to your team and you don't lose anything because you poured yourself out as an offering. So I really think that people should stop looking at it as I have failed if after 13 years I go back to my team, which happens to be a very good team, and I build football in a different way. But new faces, new voices, a new approach helps as part of the mix, because moving football forward in Ghana will take everything.
How do you respond to those who say, well, Amanda Clinton is a bit of an opportunist. She doesn't invest her money in football, has spent very limited time with football people. There's a vacancy and suddenly here she comes and says, I want to do this.
Well, what a wonderful question. Thank you for that. I think I am definitely not an opportunist. I think, again, the fact that, June 2018, the GFA was going to be completely wound up. There would be no GFA for any of us to be putting their forms in had there not been
that was you conducting your professional role.
No, but it was beyond but it's beyond my professional role. Because, first of all, I wasn't engaged in the capacity of, initially, retainment for Ghana. I was retained for Zurich. And then we had this absolute anomaly where every week, every day, things got worse. This absolute anomaly where all of them, the entire executive committee, could not hold themselves out as belonging to the Ghana Football Association. And so stepping it up, I mean, I really didn't have to. I was like, but
did you get paid?
When asked, actually, for that part, actually, I didn't. And you can ask any one of them. I got paid for the FIFA petition. But when it got time where the heat was and where it was taking a real damage and it could affect the FIFA petition, GFA was being misinterpreted to a certain extent, I stepped up my game and not even petrol.
So you don't buy into those who say, well, that does not validate your association with football in this country.
Well, let's look at it a different way as well. I mean, you're a sportsman in terms of you had
an interest.
You had a team and a very good team at that. But if we look at, for instance, at the Premier League, if we look at football at the Premier League, if we look at football at FIFA in terms of those coming in at incredibly senior positions, what we know for sure, I mean, particularly I would be so bold as to say the last 10 years, is they do not go through the ranks. They are recruited from outside, be it Nestle or something that can showcase their skill set, etc. It's not through the ranks. Why are they from outside? Not because people hate people who are in football, that they're going to recruit someone at such a high level from outside. But the point is, as a president, we only expect you to come and do your job.
But isn't that really at a multinational level? At the national level, what you just described doesn't happen. Nobody's recruiting anybody from anywhere on any association on the continent.
Well, for instance, Premier League, if we're following, for instance, the English Premier League example, it's important to look at why people do things the way they do. Because, as I keep on saying on a lot of shows, football in Ghana is almost incestuous. In terms of...
It's a fair term.
Yes, it's incestuous. I mean, in terms of who you know, how you know them, and above all, this is the best... Is
that a bad thing, though, in this regard?
It's a bad thing if, for instance, the next GFA president, a stakeholder at any level, would not even be able to knock on that person's door because they know a decision has been reached before they knock on the door. That is a catastrophe. But if you have someone who is sitting as president that inspires renewed confidence, even from the government, FIFA, different people were like, well, there was something happened before, but we're open to this new thing. That helps. But you cannot have a situation where the old guard is so in place that literally you can't even knock on that person's door because you know the decision has been taken and you're not in the club.
Do you feel disadvantaged at this point? Or you feel that when you're knocking on the doors, they're opening for you?
As in terms of running for president?
Yes.
People find it very strange, but in no way do I feel disadvantaged because I believe one's perception of oneself and how they will be received tends to happen. I also believe that by over-preparing in terms of my knowledge of the particular areas I'm talking about, by meeting people where they are, by seeing the bigger picture, and by, God willing, if it's decided on Friday, but coming from a background of integrity, being a lawyer, these are things that help my case and help my position. And above
so you feel that in this regard, when you look at the field, your being an outsider is actually the advantage that you have?
No. Me being who I am, with my experience and with my unique attributes, is what will propel me to move forward. Being an outsider is by no means the advantage, but being able to see the whole picture in terms of how it can sit together, how, for instance, a CRM system can help tabulate what exactly is happening with stakeholder engagement, etc. And engaging with corporate Ghana and engaging with grassroots. These are the things that will make a difference. And to tell you the truth, I'm quite unemotional, about the whole thing. Not only the process, but should I get the role? I would just be professional. I'm quite unemotional, but with the people you've met who are running and the people who have meant this position for quite a while, sometimes the interest gets misguided because it is about the position and not the function. So, fine, it is a nice title in terms of it's a president. The title is president. But I've always subscribed to, if you fulfill the function, then people will really know that, for instance, you're president. And some of the people running, perhaps, it really is, I just want to be president. And when I sit at the top of that, I'm just going to be like, yeah.
That is how you see it.
And then they will just get a good vice. No, I don't want to say anything, but apparently at least 3 aspirants allegedly called one of the people who signed for me for the... in order to be considered for vetting. And very early on, very patronizing. They were like, he didn't tell me which ones, but he said 3 of them. And they said, don't worry, tell her she'll get vice. Which is very fine. So it's kind of like, well, we could...
There had been whispers.
There had been whispers that people tend to give vice presidents to people who are very capable. And then they would ceremonially...
That would be hard to do considering
because it's a completely different channel.
Now.
Yeah, I know that. But again, it also shows the mindset of people, certain people, that once we get in, we'll reorganize whatever's been done. So don't worry. Because I brought that point up. I was like, I'm not even picking up forms for the EXCO, because it's the EXCO that eventually votes the vice. But they said, don't worry. Okay. So you see, already it's the mentality of once the old gets in, everything that has been added or scrubbed out will be changed. And we also have to look at the significance of the statutes in terms of it is a wonder that the GFA could have statutes whereby there was no length of time for the president in terms of, I think initially it was 8 years. All of a sudden that suddenly disappeared. And we had someone entering their 4th term. Do you see what I mean? So, again, if the powers that be or were have that much power and influence delegates to that extent, what have we spent the last 12, 13 months doing?
All right, then interesting question from Miss Amanda Clinton. Interesting conversation. We are entering the final phase of that conversation. When Face to Face returns. Welcome back to Face to Face. Very exciting conversation this day with Miss Amanda Clinton. I must say I'm enjoying the conversation. I hope you are too. So, Amanda, let's talk the Premier League now, which is the flagship. What are your ideas when it comes to the Ghana Premier League? Is what everybody watches, where everybody wants to see their Kotoko and Hearts, not playing in empty stadiums any longer, where contracts are no longer hidden in cabinets and whatnot. What is the Clinton vision?
The Clinton vision for Premier League is essentially, I keep on saying this, you might not agree, but more money in football would allow more people to have a renewed sense of this is our national sport, because it's been filtered down. The game is being played more strategically. People have more of an interest in terms of who wins, who doesn't win. And that in turn brings more people to the stadiums, particularly if one, raises money from corporate Ghana and different places, whereby you can try and fill up stadiums without people paying, ideally.
Before you go on, how hard of a task do you think it will be convincing corporate Ghana that we have changed? It's not just that Amanda Clinton has come, so we have changed. It's not an easy task.
It's not an easy task, but the fact that people are even having this discussion or the conversation that, she's a woman, she's from outside, can she really think she can become the president of the GFA? And
do you think people have been bothered? Sorry to cut in there, but because you mentioned this, do you think that it bothers people that you're a woman and you decided to enter it?
Oh, it definitely doesn't bother them. It just makes them interested in terms of where I'm coming from and what makes me think that I'm capable of doing this. But we also have to remember, I think the highest ranking administrator that is African is, again,
Fatma
Samora. She's a woman. No one even blinked in terms of the idea that a woman would actually go out there and do the bidding in terms of her mandate. It's not an issue because we associate women with the ability to not only carry out work, but to do so with integrity. So I think it's ironic that it's perhaps just the first time that a woman, God willing, will be on the ballot per se, that people are even having this conversation. But at Premier League, I also think, I've had discussions with some Premier League clubs, and
what have they been telling you?
And they would, and not the ones that people think I've been having conversations, other ones. And, they would say things like, we want to be able to be independent, like the English Premier League, so we can raise money for ourselves, etc., etc. And, they have ideas of how they want to do that.
So an independent league has been mooted to you?
Yes, it has been. I mean, it's not by one club. I mean, quite a few of the clubs, particularly the moments like this, whereby, people were, the football clubs weren't playing, and the idea grew stronger. I think that it would be wonderful to be operating outside the GFA. But again, is that in the GFA's interest? So these are the things that one would be looking at, but ultimately deciding on behalf of the GFA first, before looking at others' interests, including the Premier League's interest.
Premier League's interest also means TV and
TV rights and
broadcast rights.
Yeah.
It's something that a lot of casual fans have not been overly happy with, the fact that they don't have access to the game if it's not on pay-per-view.
And worse,
how do you deal with that?
We deal with that, first of all, by addressing what has gone on in terms of, I think the Star Times deal wasn't particularly advantageous to the GFA in terms of the amount of people who are on that platform to view. So revisiting these sort of contracts to see what can be done, because as you said, it really is about access to more people, increasing the interest in football. And one way that one can do that is by making sure it's freely available to anybody who wants to watch.
National team. Ghanaians are falling out of love with their national team. Do you get that sense? Are you one of those Ghanaians who has fallen out of love with the national team, the Black Stars?
Not at all. I think the Black Stars will come back harder than ever. I think it's an issue.
How are you going to improve that?
It's an issue of addressing, what might be going on coaching-wise, and addressing how...
You think there's a coaching problem?
Not that I necessarily think that there's a coaching problem, but when one looks at why a team doesn't do well, you look at all the factors. Is it the financing? Is it the players aren't being played well? Do we have to revamp the coaching to a particular model as opposed to the current model that's being adopted, even with the same coach? These are the things that one considers. But again, I really do think the Black Stars, even the name itself, is powerful. And the idea behind what they represent is even more powerful in terms of just Ghanaians have been in football for ages, maybe not associated football, but in one form or the other for like 100 years. And we were at the forefront. And we can get to the forefront again nationally with how we pour money into the GFA as well as stakeholder engagement. And I really think a president that can go out and do that bidding, which I would say I can if given the opportunity, is what the GFA needs.
Final words?
My final words are to the 120 delegates who are going to be voting for the next GFA president in particular. I just want you to know that if I haven't met you already, that I will be meeting you within the next week or two in order to listen further to your ideas as to how you think Ghana football can be revamped. I will also be sharing some of my ideas with you and asking you to support me as we vote for the next GFA president, which I hope you will have found from this interview is me.
Very confident Amanda Clinton. And on Friday, we'll find out if indeed she does make it to the ballot for the position of President of the Ghana Football Association. We wish you well. We'll be following the race as it makes progress. So, ends another edition of Face to Face. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. My name is Godfred Akoto Boafo. Have a good day.